out the motherfucking pack.
Right out
But
the
niggas don't know
bag.
how to act.
Hello, and welcome back to yet another NFL video. Today, we're going to talk about every major signing made by NFC teams so far up to this point. With my luck, tomorrow, fucking, I don't even know. The Giants are going to sign Michael Thomas or something and throw this whole video out of whack. But up to this point, every major signing, every team in the NFC. Shit took so long to do. I had to keep going through and editing things whenever somebody got signed. So I just decided to make it based off this point in time. So let's get right into it. Taking a look at all 16 NFC teams, starting off with the Chicago Bears. Oh shit, I didn't share screen, did I? One second. Starting off with the Chicago Bears. Let's get right into it, man. So you can see on the left side is going to be the players that this team has brought in through free agency or via trade. And on the right hand side is players that they either traded away or let walked or retired or whatever. So the Bears are a very interesting situation. And we're going to get into it more so as we go on. But this is not taking in account what I think the team is going to do in the draft. This is strictly grading their free agency, which is going to be very tough for teams like the Bears because right now the Bears don't have a quarterback. They traded away their only quarterback in a move I did not like. And so I kind of have to take that into account while also, you know, kind of already considering Caleb to be on the Bears. It's kind of weird, but you guys will get it more as we go along. So let's talk about the Bears here. What did the Bears do? Well, they let a couple of their established players walk in free agency, namely Darnell Mooney. They cut guys like Eddie Jackson, traded away Fields, and they brought in some very good veteran players. Let's get right into it. DeAndre Swift from the Eagles. I like this move. The Bears at running back, you know, ever since Jordan Howard, really, I don't feel like they've had a consistent guy. David Montgomery was good, but I feel like DeAndre Swift, just going off what he did last year in Philly, I think he could be the best Bears running back since prime Jordan Howard. And for $8 million a year, I think that's good value. So just off the top right there, I really like that move. Bringing in Kevin Byard also from the Eagles to replace Eddie Jackson. Kevin Byard didn't have a great year last season, but Eddie Jackson has been declining steadily for a while. So I'm sure Bears fans are happy with that move. Good value. Brought in Ryan Bates from the Bills, I believe, to improve the offensive line. Desperately needed help there. Also signed a guy in Coleman Shelton. He's a center. Also got Gerald Everett to play tight end alongside Cole Kmet. Good value for Gerald Everett. They now have two very solid tight ends. I think he's an upgrade over Robert Tonyan, which is what they had last season at that tight end two position. And their biggest move, though, is Keenan Allen for a fourth round pick. This was an absolute steal. Um, Keenan Allen had he was playing at an all pro level last season until he got hurt. Okay. So keep that in mind. You're getting an all pro caliber player for a fourth round pick. Now, it might just be a rental because I'm not sure if they have plans of bringing back Keenan Allen long term. That's why I would like to see them draft a guy like Romo Dunze with their second first round pick. But hey, man, Keenan Allen and DJ Moore, you bring in DeAndre Swift, Gerald Everett, that offense is looking explosive, which is why overall I really like what the Bears have done so far. Taking a look at these guys' stats a little bit more here, you can see DeAndre Swift easily a career year in Philly. Keenan Allen down there at the bottom, over 1,200 yards in just 13 games. He was actually on fire. I mean, Keenan Allen really was, you know, right there with Tyreek Hill. I feel like when he was healthy, and you can look at some of these other signings: Kevin Byard, Gerald Everett, Ryan Bates. Ryan Bates did not play a whole lot last season, but in 2022 played nearly 1,000 snaps with some solid PFF grades. That's what I'm going to be using for most of these offensive linemen. But overall, I think the Bears have done a good job so far. They've improved their roster, mainly on the offensive end, which I thought needed a lot of work. Um, the only thing holding the Bears back so far for me is the Justin Fields trade. I really did not like that move. I think getting a fourth round pick in return is just laughable. Justin, you spent a first round pick on a guy. He performed well. He grew over time, had a career year last season, and you move him for a fourth round pick. Obviously, they have their eyes set on Caleb, but still, to get a fourth round pick, I thought at the bare minimum, you're probably going to get like a late second, back for Fields. But to get a fourth rounder, that's pretty embarrassing in my opinion. So that's the only thing holding them back for me. So I'm gonna give them an A minus, because as I said, they don't have a quarterback on the roster right now. If they drafted Caleb, if they drafted Odunze, this could definitely move into an A off season for me. But just grading their free agency so far, a lot of good moves, A minus. Next up, we got the Packers here. They did a lot in the first day or two, have not done anything since then, and I can't blame them because the two moves they made were big splash signings. Um, so let's talk about what they did. They let Darnell Savage and Aaron Jones, well, they let Darnell Savage walk in free agency, then they released Aaron Jones. They replaced Darnell Savage with arguably the best safety on the entire market, Xavier McKinney. That was a great signing. I think, what is that, 17 million a season? You may think it's a lot for a safety, but Xavier McKinney is coming off a very, very good season, and I do think he is an upgrade over Darnell Savage. Now, Josh Jacobs, paying him $12 million a season, that's a lot for a running back nowadays, especially for a 4-year contract, but I do think he is an upgrade over Aaron Jones, who is coming off not so great of a season for Aaron Jones standards. So you lose two established vets on this team, but in my opinion, you upgrade at both of those positions. Now, you also lost a couple of other important pieces. You lost former All Pro Devondre Campbell. You let him go in free agency. David Bakhtiari. That's not that big of a loss, honestly, because he has just been so injury prone. Him leaving really doesn't matter, in my opinion. It only saves cap space. But you also lost some important rotational offensive linemen. John Runyon was a starter. Yosh Neiman played a lot in Bakhtiari's injury time. So they do have some holes they have to patch on the offensive line. Um, that defense does also still have some holes, in my opinion, notably at linebacker and safety still. But you made two splash moves. You got two good players at good value. Taking a look at these two guys a little more in depth, Josh Jacobs, 2022, he had an all pro season. He was amazing. Last season, not so much. He got off to a really, really slow start. But when he picked it up, he was starting to look more like himself. So I'm not concerned that he's fallen off or anything. I think he will look very, very good in Green Bay. Same with Xavier McKinney coming off an extremely impressive season. You know, a sub 70 passer rating allowed for a safety is incredibly impressive while also putting together well over 110 tackles. He had a great season. So, like I said, they only made two moves, but both those moves were very, very good, upgrading at positions you already had established, but, you know, not filling out that offensive line is a concern to me. Um, I don't love just straight up releasing Devondre Campbell. I'm sure you could have figured out a way to retain him for maybe a little bit less money. Um, so not not perfect all around, but still good. I gave the Packers a B minus, because while those two moves were good, you already had a safety and a running back. You're kind of upgrading on the strength, and you didn't refill the talent that you had lost on the offensive line. So good, but not great in my opinion. Next up, we got the Lions. Very interesting for the Lions here. So every player they brought in here, I really like. I think the Carlton Davis trade was an amazing move for the Lions. He's been injury prone lately on the Buccaneers, not what he was his first year or two in the league, but for a third round pick, I think that's very good value to get a new number one corner. Amik Robertson from the Raiders had a good season just now. $4 million a year is great value for him. You need help at cornerback. Lions addressed that early, got multiple guys in there. They brought in DJ Reader from the Bengals. He's just a really good defensive tackle. You pay him over $13 million a season. He's a day one starter coming in there, and I think he kind of rounds out that already talented defensive line. So I really like that move. And then you bring in a veteran offensive guard who was a Pro Bowler last season, if I'm not mistaken, from the Ravens, Kevin Zeitler. It's just a 1 year deal. He's up there in age, but he was a great player last season. And you lost Jonah Jackson to the Rams. You get a day one replacement for him. So you lost a couple defensive backs, notably safety. You didn't really address that, but you do have Brian Branch on the roster already. You would hope, I feel like, that you would move Brian Branch back to safety, and because he was playing cornerback a lot last season, and you would just plug in Carlton Davis and Meek Robertson. The Cam Sutton release, he's going to jail apparently for beating his wife or something like that. I don't know what it is, but they got a warrant out for him, and the Lions cut bait with him. But he was burnt toast anyways last season, so I'm not. That might be, addition by subtraction right there. He was just a massive flop of a signing last season. Romeo Okwara retired, so the loss of talent actually is not that bad when you think about it because CJ Gardner Johnson only played like 3 games. He was hurt all of last season. Cam Sutton sucked. Tracy Walker, Romeo Okwara role players, and Jonah Jackson was their biggest loss, in my opinion. But you replace that with a possible upgrade in Kevin Zeitler. So I thought the Lions actually had a really good offseason. Taking a look more in depth here, Carlton Davis, as you can see, only played 12 games. That passer rating allowed is not great. Like I said, he's not the guy he was in his first 2 years, but if you're the Lions, you are hoping that he can kind of regain some of that form. And look, even if he was just as good as he was last season, which was solid, he'd still be the best cornerback on this team, right? And then you got Meek Robertson, who had a better passer rating allowed, obviously not in as big of a role as Carlton Davis, but he still had 2 interceptions, 6 passes defended, 50 tackles. Meek Robertson, very slept on role player for the Raiders last season. They're looking for him to step up a little more next season. DJ Reader, like I said, very, very good PFF grade. He is known for stopping the run, and that's what they're going to look for him to do next season. And then Kevin Zeitler down there, look at that pass blocking grade from PFF, 82.5. That's great. Nearly 1,000 snaps played last season. I really like this move. I like the Lions offseason as a whole. Every player they brought in, I think, is going to play big role for them next season. And the losses they had, I don't feel like are going to affect them too much. So I gave the Lions an A minus overall. I would have liked to see them do more in addressing their secondary. I would have liked to see them bring in an established safety, especially when there's so many veterans out on the market. I don't love letting Jonah Jackson walk. I think Kevin Zeitler is a band-aid, but there's a Kevin or Zach. Yeah, Kevin Zeitler. But still, I liked all the moves they made, you know, and like I said, the losses they had, especially Cam Sutton, burnt toast, wife beaten ass, is, you know, not that big of an issue in my eyes. Vikings here, extremely interesting, a lot of movement. Um, let's start with what they lost. This kind of whole offseason for the Vikings was sparked off with losing Kirk Cousins. And I'm just going to come out and say it. I do not think they wanted to lose Kirk Cousins. I don't think they were planning on Kirk walking. From what I heard from their head coach at the combine, he did a little interview and he made it seem like they were really focused on bringing Kirk back. And I do not think they were prepared for him walking to the Falcons. So I think that really hurts them. You kind of trade, in a sense, Daniil Hunter to the Texans for their best pass rusher last season, Jonathan Grenard, which, you know, I'll just call that a wash. Losing Daniil Hunter certainly hurts. He was arguably the best player on the whole team besides Justin Jefferson. So you can't really replace that. But Jonathan Grenard is a very good young player, was coming off a career season. To get him for what's that, $19 million a season, that's pretty good value. Um, Alexander Madison was not very good. Don't mind him walking. Jordan Hicks, pretty good starter or pretty good role player, I should say. Same with KJ Osborne. DJ Wanham, that really hurts. If you were going to lose Daniil Hunter, I was almost positive they were going to bring back DJ Wanham, who's had multiple good seasons in Minnesota. So to lose him does not make much sense to me. I would have loved to see them bring back DJ Wanham and sign Jonathan Grenard. So that's a little confusing to me. They made a few good linebacker additions in Van Ginkel and Blake Cashman. The Aaron Jones signing, massive upgrade over Alexander Madison. That's probably their best signing of the entire offseason. Sam Darnold, I don't think he's going to start next season. I think they're going to draft a guy with their first round pick. Um, Also brought in Kamu Grugier-Hill, Jihad Ward from the Giants, kind of as a replacement to DJ Wonnum, but I still would rather have DJ Wonnum. And some more rotational pieces. They're taking a gamble on Shaquille Griffin. I think he is washed, but maybe he still has some gas in the tank. That's kind of a prove it deal for him, a last chance, if you will. Taking a look here, you can see Jonathan Grenard, man, 12 and a half sacks, 15 TFLs, 20 plus, all those numbers, man. Those first three numbers right there, those are all Pro Bowl caliber numbers right there. Jonathan Grenard is a very good young player in just 15 games too. So, his potential is through the roof. I'm sure they're looking to him as their premier pass rusher moving forward. Aaron Jones, as you can see, coming off not a very good year for his standards, but he did miss time. He was hurt. I do expect that he will bounce back as long as he's healthy. So, like I said, I love that move. Blake Cashman and Andrew Van Ginkel, both very good additions. I did not know Van Ginkel was that good of a pass rusher, but 6 sacks, 19 QB hits, that's impressive, as well as 8 pass breakups. So they made some very good linebacker additions. Then you can see Jihad Ward with 5 sacks. So they've made a lot of additions, but I still have to give them a C plus because I just I don't think they wanted to lose Kirk Cousins. If you could convince me that this was all planned from the start, that they were going to let Kirk walk and draft a guy all along, then maybe I can understand that. But the fact that they had to trade with the Texans to acquire an additional first round pick makes me believe that this was not in their plans. If you were going to let Kirk walk the whole time, then why wouldn't you have already made that move to get another first round pick earlier? Because they made that move with the Texans to get the first round pick after Kirk walked, which leads me to believe they were not expecting that. So I think they were caught off guard by that. If they brought Kirk back and still made all of these moves, then I'd be giving them a B plus, an A minus, an A. But that's not the case. Quarterback is the most important position, and right now they have Sam Darnold. So I have to take that into consideration. But they have made a lot of good moves. If they take a good quarterback in the draft, then I could easily see this grade taking a massive jump. But as for right now, it's a C plus. As you can see here, this is what the NFC North is looking like. Bears and Lions kind of nailed it. I think every NFC North team made a lot of great additions. I'll say that. But the Packers and Vikings, I'd say, lost a lot. Notably the Vikings, but the Packers also on their offensive line, as well as Devondre Campbell. But each one of these teams made splash signings and trades. So, each team, in my opinion, has the opportunity to get better through this free agency. Moving to the NFC South, we got the Falcons, who did sign Kirk Cousins from the Vikings. Some people are upset with the amount, but the fact of the matter is, if you just look at Kirk Cousins these last 4 or 5 years, he's been one of, if not the best, but he's been a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. And some people might scoff when I say that, but a lot of these other guys that we would consider to be top 5 aren't consistent. Joe Burrow's missed 2 out of his last 4 seasons. Um, Justin Herbert is hurt regularly. Josh Allen is not consistent. Um, who else is there besides Kirk Cousins? CJ Stroud, incredibly young. Jalen Hurts, one big season. Brock Purdy has played like 20 games. How many guys would you really take over these last stretch of seasons over Kirk Cousins? I think he has been heavily slept on. He deserved this contract. Now, it's some of these other moves that I liked at first, but now that I dig a little deeper into it, Darnell Mooney, paying him $13 million a season. Darnell Mooney has done very little in the last 2 years. If they would have paid him this money after 2021, then I'd support that. He had a really good season in 2021, but the last 2 seasons he has not done much. So I don't like the amount for Darnell Mooney whatsoever. Rondell Moore, you get him for free because you dumped off Desmond Ritter, but I like that move a lot more than Darnell Mooney. They haven't really done anything besides that. I really don't like letting Jeff Okudah walk to the Texans for no money. I think the Texans paid him like $4 million a season. Jeff Okudah was good for the Falcons. Some people disagree, but the stats say Jeff Okudah had a really good season, arguably a career year last year in Atlanta. And to let him walk for nothing, I really don't like that move. Um, as far as the other guys, Jonnu Smith, Jalen Hawkins, yeah, I guess you could have brought him back, but I'm not really too tripped up over that. The two things holding this back for me are the amount of money you gave to Darnell Mooney and letting Jeff Okuda walk. Those are the only two things. Besides that, I think the Falcons had a really good offseason. Taking a look here, um, I mean, just look at that. Darnell Mooney, he played 15 games. I know the Bears' offense wasn't too good, but man, it just seems to me like Darnell Mooney had no connection with Justin Fields for some reason. I don't really get it, but 2 years in a row, he has not done much. And then Rondell Moore, he's a young player. He has some potential, but he himself just didn't do much. So at first, when I saw these moves, I'm like, oh man, Atlanta brought in some very talented young receivers, but the production has not really been there for him. So Kirk obviously is the front runner of the Falcons' whole offseason. And he is strong enough to carry their offseason, I believe. He is their franchise quarterback. He is the best quarterback they have had since MVP Matt Ryan. And he does give this Falcons team a chance now to compete for a Super Bowl, in my opinion, because they were a good team last season. All they were missing is a quarterback, and they now have one of the best. So I'm gonna give them an A minus because they accomplished the goals they set out to do. They made their offense explosive. Next up, we got the Panthers, probably the most action out of any team, which I like, by the way. They were the worst team in the NFL last season, and you needed to make a lot of moves to change that. Notably, protecting Bryce Young, which would I have spent $153 million on Robert Hunt and Damian Lewis? No. As a Seahawks fan, Damian Lewis is not worth, what's that, $13 million a season. However, when your offense and especially your offensive line was so abysmal, you will not see me downplaying the need of offensive linemen. And Robert Hunt and Damian Lewis are starting offensive linemen, and the Panthers, they did what they had to do to get them in the building. They also traded Dante Jackson, and look, they purged their entire Let's just run through the list of either starters and just important role players. Brian Burns, Von Bell, Frankie Louvu, Gross Matos, Dante Jackson, Jeremy Chin, Grugier Hill, CJ Henderson. That's 8 players. I would say about 6 of those guys are starters. 6 starters either just traded or letting them walk in free agency. You know, they are not going to be very good defensively next season. Now, they made some good moves. They brought in DJ Wanham for a very affordable price. That was a good move. Josie Jewell for about $7 million a year. That's a good move. They made some solid additions, but they lost all their star power. They have nothing defensively, in my opinion. Who they got? They got the defensive tackle from Auburn. I'm blanking on his name right now. Um, they have J.C. Horn. Is that it? Are those the only players on the Panthers defense I can name? It's not much, man. They kind of sold their soul of their defense to hopefully improve this offense for Bryce Young. Because look, the Deontay Johnson trade, that's a good move. They needed help at receiver. Deontay Johnson, his time was kind of up in Pittsburgh. I thought, he was on a downwards trajectory. So I think he needs a change of scenery. The Panthers need a receiver. That was a good move, in my opinion. They brought in David Moore as just an explosive deep threat. I like that. They brought in Josh Neiman from the Packers. He was good depth for them. I expect them to help, or I expect him to help the Panthers offensive line. So they made a lot of moves. Let's take a look at the biggest guys here. Robert Hunt has played a massive role for the Dolphins lately, and he's graded very highly. Okay, I like this move. 20 mil a year. Yeah, it's expensive. Yeah, he's one of the highest paid interior offensive linemen in football. Maybe he deserves to be, and especially for the Panthers who are just desperate, you have to overpay for guys that are good. And Damian Lewis, as a Seahawks fan, I'll tell you, he's not the best, but he's okay. He's solid. He's very good. Or no, he's good. He's very solid. And he's played a lot. He has a lot of experience, especially these last 2 seasons, and he's graded solidly. Deontay Johnson, like I said, downward trajectory. Hopefully, as long as the Panthers draft a receiver with their first pick, it should take some pressure off him. Hopefully, let's say Deontay Johnson, Adam Thielen, and Troy Franklin. I think it's a massive upgrade from what they had last season. DJ Wanham, like I said, their best defensive addition in my opinion. Josie Jewell also is coming off a solid season. And they even got Ashawn Robinson from the Giants. So, look, I'm gonna give the Panthers a B. because I respect the effort. Yeah, they overpaid for some guys. Yeah, they just slaughtered their defense. But hopefully, the only hope the Panthers have is that Bryce Young pans out to be good, and they have to do whatever they can to try and help him along that process. So I think that's what they did this offseason. Next up, we got the Saints. They are kind of strangled by their cap restraints, so they were not really able to do much. The Saints' whole offseason comes down to Chase Young, right? That was their big splash. This is what they're banking their whole free agency on. Can Chase Young prove his worth in this 1 year contract? And then eventually, I'm sure they'll re sign him. And can he be the eventual Cam Jordan replacement? That's what this all comes down to. Let's take a look at what he did last year. Did they lose anybody? They finally cut bait with Michael Thomas. They cut Marcus May. They lost some important. They lost four big rotational defensive players, especially Isaac Yiadom, who had a great season last year. But offensively, they don't really lose much. And then defensively, would you trade Marcus May, Zach Bond, Malcolm Roach, and Yiadom for a good version of Chase Young? I probably would. And they also got Willie Gay. Taking a look here at Chase Young, 7.5 sacks, 9 QB hits. These stats by themselves are not that impressive, but he only played 735 snaps. Now, we're going to get to some guys who played a lot less snaps than that and produced a lot more. But look, I think if Chase Young can stay relatively healthy, play between 900 and 1,000 snaps, I think he can be a damn good player in the NFL. I think he proved it his rookie year. The only thing holding him back has been his injury concerns. So if he can figure that out, if he can put together a healthy season, I think he will be incredibly productive in New Orleans. And I think that he will live up to this 1 year contract. I'm gonna give him a C plus because they didn't do much. Like I said, their entire offseason is hinging on Chase Young. And I respect the fact that even with cap constraints, they still went out and found a way to make a splash move, which I respect. Next up, we got the Buccaneers. Um, the Buccaneers, they really didn't do much in terms of bringing in guys. Their two biggest moves were re-signing Baker and Mike Evans, which I am taking into consideration here. It's not just who you bring in via trades or signings, it is who you re-sign as well. So that's the biggest thing for the Buccaneers here. They did lose a lot of talent defensively. Starting linebacker, Devin White. Starting edge rusher, Shaquille Barrett. Unfortunately, Shaquille Barrett did kind of take a drop in production after the tragic death of his child. I think his child drowned before last season, and I'm sure it affected his play. I mean, how could it not? But he was kind of at the end of his legs in Tampa, and the Carlton Davis trade. I think that was a win-win trade. Like I said, Carlton Davis, he was having a lot of injuries. He was not playing as well as he used to. So to get a third-round pick back for him, that's solid value. Um, so hopefully the Buccaneers will replace the losses on defense with their draft capital. And they made some additions. They signed Jordan Whitehead back. He was a part of that championship team. That's good value for him, $4.5 million a season. Bryce Hall and Javier Thomas. I'm not sure if those guys. I mean, Bryce Hall certainly. I think you would like to see him play a role for the Buccaneers next season. They also made some additions to their offensive line. Ben Bredesen from New York and Sua Opata from Philly. So, not a lot in terms of free agency signings. Mainly, we got Jordan Whitehead here. Let's take a look at him. He actually had a very good tenure in New York. I don't think a lot of people are going to give him credit for that. He had 3 picks in the first game of last season, and he did not miss a game in 2 years, which I really respect. So I think Jordan Whitehead is going to come right back in and be a starter for Tampa Bay. Reunite him with what's his name? Antoine Winfield. You got Bryce Hall as well from the Jets. This is 2021 stats. So I'm going back a little ways. I understand that. But in 2021, he had 16 passes defended. It's like an Isaac Yiadom type of season from Bryce Hall in 2021. Also, take a look there at Ben Bredesen. The grades are not very good because he played for the Giants, but he's depth, that is what it is. So mainly because they brought back Baker and Mike Evans, which I was not expecting them to do. I thought Mike Evans was going to walk, but they did find a way to convince him to return. I'm going to give the Buccaneers a B because they were a playoff team last season, and just based off the moves they made, if they nail the draft, I expect them to be a playoff team next season as well. So here are the grades overall. Falcons, obviously, solidifying themselves as a contender by bringing in a franchise quarterback. Panthers, made a lot of moves to improve their offense, gutted their defense. Buccaneers re-signed their key free agents, and the Saints found a way to work around their limitations in bringing a big splash signing. Moving on to the NFC West, the Cardinals, they did not make a big splash signing, but I thought they made some really under. One second, let me just make sure this is still going. Okay, my fault there. My mic always dies. It's a guarantee. But back into this. The Cardinals did not make a lot of splash moves, but I thought they made some really underrated sightings. Their cornerback room was awful last season, which is why bringing in Sean Murphy Bunting from the Titans, I thought, was a very good signing. Also, not paying him a whole lot of money in the process. Justin Jones from Chicago, to improve the interior of their defensive line. I like that move. Um, Jonah Williams to replace DJ Humphries. So you bring in Jonah Williams. I think that's about an even move. I don't think DJ Humphries was all that good, and Jonah Williams with a change of scenery, maybe he plays better than he did in Cincinnati. Bring in Mac Wilson from New England and Bilal Nichols from Vegas. So, I would have liked to see the Cardinals do more. I think their roster is a ways away from competing again, but they're setting the foundation this offseason, which I like. You traded away Rondell Moore. The Desmond Ritter trade, I should knock a whole grade off just for that. What the hell are you doing bringing in Desmond Ritter? Letting Hollywood walk in free agency, you probably had to do that. I don't think he wanted to return, and you probably would have had to overpay to keep him anyways. Um, so yeah, mainly you can see here, Justin Jones as an interior defensive lineman had a pretty good season last season, all things considered. Sean Murphy Bunting, as you can see, he is their new cornerback one. Jonah Williams, not missed a snap the last 3 years. That's very impressive to me. And Mac Wilson, Bilal Nichols, both solid role players in the defensive end, should play a decent role in Arizona. So, you know, not much to talk about here. I'm gonna give them a B minus. I would have liked to see them be more aggressive. I do think losing Hollywood Brown and Rondale Moore hurts, but if we assume they bring in Marvin Harrison Jr., then all things should be helped there. So B minus for now. They have, but I'll say this: their first three picks in the draft, they have a chance to absolutely nail it. Okay, they could knock it out of the park if things fall into place for them. So watch out for the Cardinals having just an A plus draft. Next up, we got the Niners. Almost all of the Niners' activity here revolves around losing players in their front seven and replacing those players. Notably, you lose Eric Armstead and Chase Young, right? Both key fixtures of their team last season, mainly Eric Armstead. He's been there for a while, had a lot of good seasons. Chase Young was their big get in the middle of last season. You lose them both. You bring in, though, Leonard Floyd to replace Chase Young, which I do think it might even be an upgrade, for a 2-year deal, especially. Um, you don't really get a replacement for Eric Armstead. You get Malik Collins from the Texans, which is a great trade for the Niners. And you also get Devondre Campbell to play alongside Fred Warner. That was a really good move for them. Also, man, the Isaac Yiadom sign. They got Isaac Yiadom from the Saints. It's a great move. I hate the Niners so much, but I cannot deny the fact they're one of the best run teams in the NFL. They lost some good role players. Clelin Ferrell had a career year last season. Javon Kinlaw had been there for a while. Oren Burks, solid year. So you lost some solid role players, but like I said, not really a whole lot to talk about with the Niners besides just shifting out players in their front seven. But Isaac Yiadom, I think, was their most underrated signing. Taking a closer look, Leonard Floyd over 10 sacks. Leonard Floyd has been so consistent these last 4 or 5 years. I mean, nobody really talks about it for some reason, but championship with the Rams, played good last season in Buffalo. It's a really good signing. Gross Matos to kind of replace Kellen Farrell. Isaac Yiadom, man, 14 pass breakups last season in New Orleans. And Malik Collins, 18 quarterback hits as an interior defensive lineman is so difficult. 5 sacks. That was an amazing trade. They made so many good moves. Um, but I'm gonna give them a B. I would have liked to see them address that offensive line. I think they've lost a couple players recently. I think it needs some help. They kind of only focused on that front seven outside of Isaac Yadam. Um, but still, they made a lot of good moves, man. I can't hate on this. Honestly, I probably should have given them a B plus. Matter of fact, yeah, not I've talked myself into it. They're getting a B plus. I'm going to go back and edit it afterwards. They had a really good offseason. I can't hate. Next up, we got my Seattle Seahawks here. Uh, where do I start, man? If this was just based off like the first 2 days of free agency, I would have given my Seahawks like a F, honestly, because I'm gonna be a little more harsh on them than the average fan would. Um, we just did some things this free agency that just really blew my mind. So we cut Jamal Adams, Quandre Diggs, and Will Disley, which I was not mad at. All those three moves I feel like needed to happen for our cap space. Then we let Jordan Brooks and Bobby Wagner walk in free agency. So for about 2 or 3 days, we just didn't have any linebackers on the roster, which concerned me. We also let Damian Lewis and Evan Brown both walk. Both were starters for us last season, but I'm not mad that our offensive line was not too good last season. So, okay, let's just break it down like this. To replace Jamal Adams and Quandre Diggs, we bring in Rayshawn Jenkins and Kevon Wallace. I don't hate that. I think we got younger, we got more athletic, and hopefully these guys can tackle better than Quandre Diggs, and they can just play more than Jamal Adams. That's what I'm hoping for. So I like those moves. We replace Bobby Wagner and Jordan Brooks with Tyrell Dodson and Jerome Baker. I don't like these moves. I think there were better players we could have gotten. I would have loved to get Patrick Queen. I don't know why we didn't pull the trigger on that move. That would have just been my dream. I don't know why we didn't bring back Bobby Wagner for I think he's making like $7 million next season. That's a bad move in my opinion. Paying Jerome Baker the same as Bobby Wagner, I don't get it. But so we downgraded at linebacker undeniably, but if in terms of just damage control, I guess Tyrell Dodson and Jerome Baker are not that bad. Um, we bring in George Fant to be a rotational offensive lineman for us next season. I think he could play very well. He played for us in the past. Jonathan Hankins from the Cowboys to be a rotational nose tackle for us. I like that move. That was a good signing from us. Um, the Sam Howell trade. Yeah, this kills any hopes of the Seahawks drafting a quarterback in the first round. I don't know, man. We do not have a lot of draft capital at all in the second and third rounds, which is why I'm hoping we trade down like 7 or 8 spots to get an extra second round pick. But man, look, Sam Howell, he had, he led the league in interceptions. Yeah, I don't think Sam Howell is a very good player. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not gonna pretend like just now that he's a Seahawk. He has all this potential. Maybe he can develop. That's possible. Maybe he can learn some things. But if Sam Howell is our bet at a future quarterback, I'm concerned. I did not like that move. So, taking a closer look here at some guys, um, I think we did good in terms of reloading and replacing guys on the defense. We got a lot younger. Hopefully, these guys will tackle better. We need better run defense. And we have some holes left open that we need to patch in the draft. But all things considered, I do like a lot of the moves we made. I'm going to give the Seahawks a B. Essentially, what we did is replace Jamal Adams, Quandre Diggs, Bobby Wagner, and Jordan Brooks with Tyrell Dodson, Jerome Baker, Rayshawn Jenkins, and Jordan Love, essentially. So that's a lot younger and it's a lot cheaper. So I think that's good for the Seahawks. Next up, we got the Rams here. Aaron Donald retired. I'm not really going to hold that against them, but it is a massive player that they lost. Also, let a couple more of their defensive role players walk. But they brought back Darius Williams from the Jaguars, who was a part of that Rams Super Bowl team. That was a great signing. I don't know why the Jags released him in the first place. He's coming off a really, really good season. So that's a great signing from the Rams. Also, bring in Jonah Jackson from the Lions. They might have overpaid for him, but to improve the protection for Matt Stafford, I like that move. Um, Cam Curl to replace Jordan Fuller. I do think that's an upgrade. And Colby Parkinson from my Seahawks. A little bit of an overpay, but he's a great blocker. a good rotational tight end. So not a lot to talk about for the Rams, but all four players they brought in, I think are going to help. And I think especially guys like Darius Williams and Jonah Jackson are really big additions that will start immediately and just be upgrades at what they had. And Cam Curl as well, a good young player, well, a young player who is also going to help a very bad secondary last season for the Rams. So I'm gonna give the Rams an A minus. I know I kind of brushed by them because they didn't make a lot of moves, but the moves they did make are high impact, and also I just think are going to help them a lot. I think Darius Williams for $7 million a season is a great pickup. I think Jonah Jackson is a instant starter and an instant upgrade over what you had last season. So Rams had a very good offseason. The best in the NFC West, in my opinion. Niners, I have to edit that. I'm gonna give them a B plus in hindsight. They made a lot of good moves. My Seahawks, good. It hurt me though. It was an emotional roller coaster. And the Cardinals, also solid, but in my opinion, the worst out of any team in the NFC West. Next up, we got the Cowboys. Man, just look at that. Look at what they lost, man. It's a lot. It's now that I'm looking at it, man, it's a lot. Now look, I understand that the Cowboys are kind of where the Saints are in terms of their hands are tied because you have Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, Micah Parsons all coming up for extensions. But man, I don't care how many guys you have to pay coming up. You cannot just bleed talent in the NFL while all of these teams around you are getting better and expect to work, right? You didn't even win a playoff game last season, and you just lost. Let's count the starters: Dorrance Armstrong, Tyron Smith, Michael Gallup, Van Der Esch, Tony Pollard, Biotish, Jonathan Hankins. You can't just lose 7 starters and replace them with one and expect to compete, especially in your own division. Now, I don't know if they're going to be better than the Commanders next season. They're probably going to be better. They're okay. Never mind. They'll probably, but like I'm looking at the Cowboys as like a 9-win team next season. They'd lost so much talent. Look, I'll admit, Eric Kendricks is a very good signing, right? He had a really good season. He's been a consistently good linebacker for a long time. He's a good player. DeMarvion Overshown. They drafted him in the 3rd round last season. Maybe he's going to rebound from his injury, and you'll have an upgraded linebacking core. Okay, sure. Maybe Mozzie Smith comes in and replaces Jonathan Hankins, but you lost your starting center. You lost your starting running back. You lost your starting tackle. Where are the replacements for those? You can't replace all those guys in this draft class. It's just, I mean, the depth on the defensive line, Dante Fowler, Dorrance Armstrong, those are big players for you last season, especially Dorrance Armstrong. Uh, man, look, I gave the Cowboys a D. Like I said, just because you have cap constraints does not mean you just let everybody walk. And they're probably going to lose Stephon Gilmore too. I mean, I don't think they're going to bring back Stephon Gilmore. So, man, the Cowboys have to nail this draft. And I don't know who you draft in the 1st round. It probably has to be tackle. Just some type of help on the offensive line because man, they're struggling. They're hurting in Dallas right now. The fans are extremely unhappy, and I do think they have had the worst free agency in the NFL so far. Next up, we got the Commanders. They have made a lot of moves, similar to the Panthers, because they were a really bad team and they had a lot of moves to make. Um, Head coach Dan Quinn has made it his mission to bring in a few Cowboys, but look, they have made a lot of great improvements to this front 7. Clinton Farrell from the Niners, Bobby Wagner from my Seahawks, Frankie Louvu, Dante Fowler, Dorrance Armstrong. They made a lot of additions to their front 7. And then offensively, they also made some moves that I think will really help. Tyler Biotish as their new starting center to upgrade their offensive line. Austin Eckler as a replacement to Antonio Gibson, a massive upgrade to Antonio Gibson. Zach Ertz as a replacement for Logan Thomas. I think that's a bit of a downgrade. And they, even made some moves in the secondary. You lost Kendall Fuller and Cam Curl. You bring in Michael Davis and Jeremy Chin, Overall, they still have a lot of holes in their roster that have to be filled with the draft, but I like the aggressiveness to bring in a lot of guys especially defensively. Let's take a look at a couple of these players, man. Dorrance Armstrong had a really good season. Look at that. Only 446 snaps played. He was a role player in Dallas that could break out next season, easily break out with the Commanders. Tyler Biotish, 3 straight years over 1,000 snaps. That's a good center, a really good center for only $10 million a season. Frankie Louvu, coming off a career year. Look at those stats. He filled the stat sheet across the board. Bobby Wagner, same thing. He led the NFL in tackles. Led the NFL. I don't think he's washed as a Seahawks fan. I think he still has some gas in the tank. Austin Eckler is coming off a down year. But he still, if nothing else, is an amazing third down back. Gives you a big threat in the receiving game. And then Michael Davis, he had a very much so down year, but in 2022, he was great. Clinton Farrell, I know that doesn't look too impressive. He did not have 471 tackles. It's 471 snaps. But as a role player for the 49ers last season, he had a great year. So I think the Commanders made a lot of really good moves. I'm going to have to give them a B minus because they don't have a quarterback on their roster. I would have liked to see them make a move at wide receiver. They have Scary Terry and Jahan Dotson, but I don't think that's enough right now. I don't love what they have as a receiving core in general. So look, if they bring in, if they draft if they draft Drake May, what's bro's name? If they draft Drake May, Jatavion Sanders, and like Jordan Morgan, then we're really talking about something here with the Commanders. So far a B minus, but a lot of potential in Washington. Next up, we got the Eagles. I think I'm going to have to give it up to Howie Roseman as just being the best general manager in football because every single move they made, honestly, just feels calculated. It feels like they knew what they were doing, man. Because let me just break it down for you here. So you let DeAndre Swift walk, right? He had a good year last season. Who do you bring in to replace DeAndre Swift? Oh, Saquon Barkley. No, okay. You let Kevin Byard walk. Who do you bring in to replace Kevin Byard? Oh, C.J. Gardner-Johnson. Okay. Jason Kelce retires. Okay. You have Cam Jurgens waiting in the wings. You release Avonte Maddox. Oh, you have Keely Ringo and Eli Ricks. Fletcher Cox retires. Oh, you got Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis. Nicholas Morrow, you release him. You got Nakobe Dean, and you bring in Zach Bond and Oren Burks, right? Sua Opeta leaves in free agency. Well, you don't bring him, but you have Landon Dickerson already on the team. And you bring in Devin White as a replacement also for Nicholas Morrow. You bring in Bryce Huff as just an addition to an already stacked pass rush group. Like, man, those top four moves, Saquon, Bryce Huff, CJ, Devin White, let's just get into it, man. It feels like the Eagles just had an answer for everything this offseason. Bryce Huff had 10 sacks last season, 21 QB hits. Look at that. He played 480 snaps. This man played as many snaps as just a regular role player for the Jets last season. And he had 10 sacks and 21 QB hits and 10 TFLs. He was good in the run game. Saquon last season only played 14 games. He had over 1,200 total yards and 10 touchdowns. CJ Gardner-Johnson, he was hurt last season. I had to go back to 2022. He led the league in picks. He only played 12 games. The only thing with CJ Gardner-Johnson is he's always hurt. I don't think he's played more than 12 games since like 2020. But man, he was great for the Eagles. Devin White. I don't care how down Devin White has looked. Devin White is a great linebacker. He is a great young linebacker who impacts the game in all aspects. And man, it's a great signing. It's just a great offseason, man. I can't hate on the Eagles. I wish I was an Eagles fan instead of the Seahawks, man, because they make so many good moves. They do so many good things in the draft and free agency. I have to give it an A plus. There is nothing I would have done differently. There's no holes I can poke in their free agency so far. There's nothing I can criticize. Everybody that left, they either already had somebody there waiting to fill their shoes, or they brought in an upgrade in free agency. So yeah, I don't know what to say, man. The Eagles are a stacked roster. Last up actually, we got the New York Giants, right? So, in my opinion, they made two really big moves. Well, they made a really big move and they lost a lot of big players. Notably, you let Xavier McKinney and Saquon Barkley walk, right? You don't really have a replacement for Xavier McKinney yet. Hopefully, you look to do that in the draft. They lost a couple role players. You lost Jahad Ward. You lost Ashawn Robinson, guys like that. But Brian Burns was their big pickup. They gave up a second round pick to get him, and they paid him a fuck ton of money. I think it was 150 million, right? That's a good move, right? You pair him with Kayvon Thibodeau and Dexter Lawrence, and you hope to say that you have a great defensive line. Okay, I get that. Devin Singletary, right? Look, I'm not going to say that he's 80% of Saquon, but he's probably about 75% of Saquon, right? And you're paying him less than half of what you would have paid Saquon. And he already has experience with Brian Dable, and he's had over 900 yards from scrimmage every year of his career. So I like Devin Singletary a lot. And for $5 million, I like him even more. Okay. You also made a lot of additions to a very bad offensive line, which I respect. Let's get into that more. You look at John Runyon, 3 straight years over 900 snaps for the Packers, right? And look, if you can play on the Packers, I'm just gonna assume you could start for the Giants. That's what I'm gonna assume. You also brought in Jermaine Elomanor from the Raiders, right? And look at his PFF grade. That's a pretty good grade. That's a pretty good grade. He's played over 900 snaps the last 2 seasons, and he has experience at tackle and guard. So I like those additions to their offensive line. Obviously, Brian Burns is the big addition to their defense, and you replace Saquon with Devin Singletary, who was coming off a good year himself. So I'm gonna give the Giants a B plus. Obviously, Xavier McKinney hurts. You don't really have a replacement for that yet. Saquon hurts, but everything considered, I think they still found a way to make a big splash signing and still improve their struggling offense, right? So this is how the NFC East grades look, right? Cowboys the worst in the whole league, Eagles the best in the whole league in my opinion, and the Giants and Commanders both improving. And this is how it looks overall. Keep in mind the Niners are going to be at a B plus, so put them above the Panthers, right next to the Giants for you. And yeah, that's how it's shaping up, man. A lot of big moves. My voice is gone now. I hope y'all enjoyed that video. Don't expect the AFC one to be up for at least a week. But thanks for watching. If you're still here, subscribe if you're new, leave a like if you enjoyed, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.
It's out the motherfucking pack.
Right out the
But niggas
pass.
don't know how to act.